Welcome to my series of basketball videos where I'll be comparing various NBA greats against each other. I'm doing this because I find that a lot of the basketball videos comparing players on YouTube are too focused on the big names and sometimes compare players from different positions. Lots of people compare Jordan to LeBron and Kobe to Duncan, for example, due to their similar levels of achievements, but since those players play different positions and have different styles of play, it's not an interesting comparison. In this series, I want to do comparisons between not just more well-known players, but players from days past, in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and the ABA as well, that most modern fans probably do not have too much knowledge about. Also, as much as possible, I want to compare players that play similar positions and/or similar playstyles. To me, that's a more interesting and fruitful comparison. I'll be using 8 different metrics to judge each player. Scoring. This category will be defined by each player's career points per game, peak points per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of scoring titles. Rebounding. This category will be defined by each player's career rebounds per game, peak rebounds per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of rebounding titles. Passing. This category will be defined by each player's career assists per game, peak assists per game, both in regular season and playoffs, and number of assist titles. Efficiency advanced metrics. This category will be defined by each player's career true shooting percentage, PER, and win shares per 48. Reason I use true shooting percentage is because it's more fair to guards. Defense. This category will be defined by each player's all defensive selections, defensive win shares, and defensive player of the year awards. The reason I'm not using blocks, steals, or defensive box plus minus is because I want to compare the achievements of older players that modern fans might not have too much knowledge about, and players in the 1960s and early 1970s do not have these stats tracked. Awards. This category will be defined by all-star appearances, all-NBA selections, MVPs, finals MVPs, and championships as a top 3 player. The reason I have to count championships as a top 3 player on the team is because otherwise you'll get into the situation where, for example, Robert Horry has 7 rings and Karl Malone has 0, and it's not representative of how much better a player is if you weren't a top 3 player on that team contributing to a championship. Also, I'll be including ABA stats and awards and using them equivalent to their respective NBA stats and awards. Also, no All-NBA third team selections are included because All-NBA third teams weren't added until the late 1980s, which is unfair to older players. Playoffs. This category will be defined by how many Eastern Conference Finals or Western Conference Finals and Finals a player has been to, and how many championships they won as a top 3 player on the team. Yes, this is supplementary to the awards category because it also rewards players for making it far in the playoffs, even if they don't necessarily win at all. Totals. This category will be defined by longevity, how many total points, rebounds, assists, and win shares a player has accumulated throughout their career, and rewards a player's durability. After all, a lot of people say the best ability is availability. And of course, this is only going to be my opinion from comparing the available metrics, since I've not watched most of these players live or even been born when some of these players have been playing. And to keep it fair, I'm judging them based on how they did in their own era. There's no comparing what this NBA player played in today's era or the 1960s, none of that. It'll be strictly based on their stats and accomplishments within their own era against that era's competition, which makes the most sense to me. So I hope you guys enjoy this comparison video and hopefully learn something new from it. Yeah. In the 40th episode in the series, we'll take a look at 2 all-time players who are iconic players for their franchises, both ending up as part of the NBA's 75th anniversary team. Paul Pierce is known as The Truth, a swingman shooting guard and small forward who is known for his fierce competitive play on the court, his clutch shooting, and for bringing the Boston Celtics their first championship since the Larry Bird era as part of the Big Three Celtics alongside Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. Clyde Drexler was known as The Glide, an athletic shooting guard who led the Portland Trail Blazers to 2 finals, although ultimately winning a championship with the Houston Rockets instead, partnering up with his university teammate Hakeem Olajuwon. Even though Pierce is more known as a small forward, he did play shooting guard during his prime as well, so I think it's fair to compare him to Drexler in this video, who is more of a pure shooting guard and has similar accomplishments. So who had the greater career? Let's find out. In the scoring category, both players were excellent scorers at their peak. Pierce averaged 19.7 points per game for his career, peaking at 26.8 points per game in 2006, and 18.7 points per game in the playoffs, peaking at 27.1 points per game in 2003. Drexler averaged 20.4 points per game for his career, peaking at 27.2 points per game in 1989, and 20.4 points per game in the playoffs as well, peaking at 27.7 points per game also in 1989. Both players carried the scoring load for their franchises at their peak. Drexler was known more for his athleticism and his hard-to-stop drives and dunks, which is where he earned his nickname, The Glide, whereas Pierce is known to be more of a mid-range and perimeter shooter, entering his points in a variety of ways. Drexler had 7 seasons averaging over 20 points per game, Pierce had 8 seasons of over 20 points per game. It really is hard to pick between these two because no matter who you pick, you are getting a player who you know can carry your team's offense and who will frustrate the opposing team's defenses. So I'll have to call this category a tie. In the rebounding category, it's also fairly close. Pierce averaged 5.6 rebounds a game for his career, peaking at 7.3 rebounds per game in 2003, and 5.8 rebounds a game from the playoffs, peaking at 9 rebounds per game also in 2003. Drexler, although he didn't play forward like Pierce did, actually averaged more rebounds per game at 6.1 rebounds per game for his career, peaking at 7.9 boards a game in 1989, and 6.9 rebounds per game in the playoffs, peaking at an astonishing 10.3 rebounds per game in 1994. Here, although Pierce is a very solid rebounder for his size and position, Drexler was clearly the more athletic player and is known as one of the greatest rebounding shooting guards ever. In fact, Drexler's 6.1 rebounds per game average is higher than any other top 10 shooting guard not named Michael Jordan. So this category will go to Clyde Drexler. In the passing category, this is not particularly close. Pierce averaged 3.5 assists per game for his career, peaking at 5.1 assists per game in 2004, and 3.4 assists per game for the playoffs, peaking at 6.7 assists per game in 2003. Pierce was a very solid, respectable passer at his peak, but Drexler was on another level. Drexler averaged 5.6 assists per game for his career, peaking at an insane 8 assists per game in 1986, and 6.1 assists per game in the playoffs, peaking at a Chris Paul-like 9.2 assists per game in 1985. Out of all the all-time shooting guards, only Michael Jordan, Jerry West, James Harden, and Allen Iverson can match Clyde Drexler's assist numbers. Drexler was a gifted passer and distributor at his position, and thus this category will go to him. In the efficiency and advanced metrics category, it's pretty interesting as although Pierce was the better shooter and the better perimeter scorer with a higher true shooting percentage, Drexler was also quite efficient and had higher PER and win shares per 48 to boot. Overall though, I don't think that the difference between them is that wide. Drexler happened to get his shots closer to the basket while Pierce was just a better marksman. So it ends up evening out between the two, so this category will actually be a tie. In the defense category, both players were above average, although not all defensive level defenders. Both Pierce and Drexler were capable of giving opposing scorers a tough time in matchups, and Drexler especially was known to be a very good ball thief as well. Pierce has more defensive win shares, but that's also because he played more games in total. But overall, this category will also be a tie. In the awards category, both are 10-time All-Stars and have a championship as the top 2 player on their teams. Pierce, however, has a Finals MVP, while Drexler has more All-NBA selections, including a first-team All-NBA selection, which Pierce doesn't have. This one's tough and depends on how much Finals MVP is valued. In this case, although I have to say that Pierce's Finals MVP could have easily gone to Kevin Garnett as well, and Pierce wasn't the clear best player in that 2008 Celtics championship team, meaning that his Finals MVP isn't quite as valuable as some other ones. This isn't to put down Paul Pierce in any way, but not all Finals MVPs are created equal. Pierce's Finals MVP isn't the same as Drexler's teammate Hakeem Olajuwon's Finals MVPs, for example. So I have to say that in this case, Drexler's extra All-NBA selections and Pierce's Finals MVPs really cancel each other out, so this category will remain a tie. In the playoffs category, it's also really close as Pierce and Drexler both went to 2 conference finals and won 1 championship. However, Drexler did take his team to 2 finals as the clear best player on his team, and in additional finals as the clear second best player on the team. Whereas for both of Pierce's finals appearances, he was the top 2 player, but not the clear best player on the team. So I think because of that context, I'll have to give Drexler the edge on this one. In the longevity category, this one easily goes to Pierce as he played about 300 more games than Drexler did, and this is reflected clearly in his lead in both points and win shares, so this category will go to Paul Pierce. So when all the categories are summed up, Pierce takes the totals and longevity category, while Drexler takes the rebounding, passing, and playoffs categories, with the rest being a tie, giving Drexler the win. Paul Pierce is rightfully remembered as one of the all-time Boston Celtics greats, carrying the torch that John Havlicek and Larry Bird carried before him as an all-time small forward, leading the Celtics to a championship alongside fellow Hall of Famers Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, the Celtics' first championship in over 20 years since the Bird era. He was known as the Truth because of his all-time clutch ability and his tenacity on the court. He was so tough, in fact, that he survived a near-fatal stabbing and never missed an NBA season despite that. Meanwhile, Clyde Drexler is the Portland Trail Blazers icon, bringing them to 2 NBA Finals and is their all-time leader in several categories, as well as a Houston icon, helping bring the Rockets the championship as well, alongside his friend Hakeem Olajuwon. Although Drexler was known perhaps as being a poor man's Michael Jordan, that was no knock on him, and he was still easily the second best shooting guard of his era, being named to the Dream Team alongside Jordan in 1992. So I hope you guys enjoyed this comparison. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next comparison video.